The antique shop's bell chimed as Raven Winter pushed open the heavy wooden door, sending motes of dust dancing in the afternoon sunlight. Her grandmother's shop always smelled of old books and furniture polish, but today something else lingered in the air, something sharp and electric, like the atmosphere before a storm. "Gran," she called out, weaving between towering shelves of curiosities. The shop had been in their family for generations, but Raven had never seen it so cluttered. New artifacts seemed to have appeared overnight. Tarnished mirrors of all sizes, their frames adorned with intricate wolf motifs that made her skin prickle. The silence that greeted her was unusual. Gran never left the shop unattended, especially not with the front door unlocked. Raven's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor as she made her way to the back room, her hand instinctively clutching the pendant around her neck. A family heirloom featuring a silver wolf enclosed in a circle of ancient runes. The pendant grew warm against her skin as she approached the largest mirror she'd ever seen, recently installed in the back room. Its surface rippled like liquid mercury, and for a moment, Raven could have sworn she saw something move within its depths. The frame was a masterwork of carved wolves, so lifelike they seemed about to leap from the silver-aged wood. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice made Raven jump. Her grandmother emerged from the shadows, her silver hair gleaming in the dim light. "It arrived last night. The collector who brought it said it's been in his family for centuries." "There's something strange about it, Gran," Raven said, unable to tear her eyes away from the mirror's surface. "It feels alive." Her grandmother's expression turned serious. "You can sense it then, just like your mother could." She touched Raven's pendant gently. "I was hoping you wouldn't inherit this gift, dear one. But the wolves have chosen their moment well." Before Raven could question what her grandmother meant, the mirror's surface began to ripple violently. The temperature in the room plummeted, and Raven's pendant burned against her skin. Through the mirror's surface, a pair of gleaming eyes appeared. Not human eyes, but those of a wolf, glowing with an otherworldly blue light. "Gran, what's happening?" Raven's voice shook as the mirror's surface began to crack, dark energy seeping through like smoke. "The barrier is breaking," her grandmother said, pulling an ornate silk. The alpha wolf howled, a sound that shattered every remaining mirror in the shop. As the fragments fell, each piece revealed a new portal, more wolves stepping through into their world. Raven felt power surge through both the pendant and the dagger, responding to her growing fear and determination. "Remember, Raven," her grandmother's voice was fierce with pride and worry. "You are a winter. This is your legacy. The wolves have chosen to reveal themselves now for a reason, and you must be ready for what comes next." As if in response to her grandmother's words, the alpha wolf launched itself at their barrier, its claws leaving trails of blue fire in the air. Raven's world had changed forever in the space of minutes, and as she stood her ground against creatures of legend and nightmare, she realized this was just the beginning of a much larger story. The antique shop, once a place of dusty memories and quiet afternoons, had become a battleground, and Raven Winter, ordinary university student just hours ago, now stood as the newest guardian of an ancient duty, facing an enemy that had haunted her family's bloodline for generations. The warehouse district stood empty in the pre-dawn light as Raven followed her grandmother through a maze of abandoned buildings. Her hand hadn't left the wolf pendant since their escape from the shop, and the silver dagger now rested in a leather sheath at her hip. Every shadow seemed to hide glowing eyes. Every echo could be the sound of claws on concrete. The Sentinels' Council maintained safe houses throughout the city, her grandmother explained, approaching what appeared to be a condemned textile factory. "This one belongs to an old friend, someone who can help you understand your abilities." The heavy steel door opened before they reached it, revealing a tall man with dark skin and silver-streaked hair. He wore a long coat covered in subtle runic patterns, and multiple mirrors of various sizes hung from his belt. His eyes immediately went to Raven's pendant. "Evelyn," he addressed her grandmother, "when you said it was urgent, I didn't realize." He trailed off, studying Raven intently. "She's Victoria's daughter, isn't she? The resemblance is striking. Kai, her grandmother nodded. We need your help. The alpha wolf has returned, and Raven's powers have just awakened. Kai's expression darkened. Inside. Quickly. The morning light won't deter them for long. The factory's interior bore little resemblance to its decrepit exterior. Ancient tapestries depicting battles between humans and wolves hung from the walls. Training equipment shared space with artifacts that hummed with barely contained power. Mirrors of all sizes were positioned strategically throughout the space, each one monitored by complex arrays of runic sensors. Your mother was one of our strongest sentinels, Kai said, leading them to a circular chamber at the center of the building. She discovered that the wolves weren't just trying to break through. They were searching for something they believed our world had taken from theirs. What were they looking for? Raven asked, watching as Kai activated a series of mirrors that created a protective barrier around the chamber. The heart of the first mirror, her grandmother answered. A powerful artifact that, according to legend, was used to create the original barriers between worlds. The wolves believe we stole it. And did we? Kai and her grandmother exchanged glances. That's complicated, Kai said carefully. The truth is, no one knows for certain. The first mirror was created centuries ago, during a time when the boundaries between worlds were less defined. What we do know is that the wolves have grown stronger, more organized. The alpha you encountered, we call him Shadowfang, is unlike any we faced before. A distant howl interrupted their conversation. The sensors around the mirrors began pulsing with warning lights. They've tracked us, her grandmother said grimly. Raven, everything we do next depends on you. Are you ready to learn? Before Raven could answer, one of the larger mirrors exploded inward. This time, instead of wolves, a figure stepped through. A woman with white hair and eyes that glowed with the same blue fire as the wolves. Runic tattoos covered her exposed skin, pulsing with power. The winter bloodline, the woman's voice echoed unnaturally. How fitting that you seek refuge with the Mirror Sage. But you cannot hide from what you are, girl. The wolves remember what your ancestors did. Diana. Kai stepped forward, mirrors floating up from his belt to orbit around him. You were one of us once. A sentinel. Why did you turn? The woman, Diana, smiled, her teeth sharp and wolf-like. I learned the truth, old friend, about what the first sentinel did to create the barriers, about the price paid in wolf blood. And now, with this girl's awakening, we can finally make things right. Raven felt power surge through her pendant as Diana raised her hands, causing every mirror in the chamber to vibrate. The air filled with the sound of cracking glass. Focus, Raven, Kai instructed calmly, even as chaos erupted around them. The pendant responds to your will, but it's not just a weapon. It's a key. The wolves fear it because it can do more than just hold them back. It can seal them away permanently. Diana's attack came without warning, a wave of blue fire that Raven barely deflected with her pendant's light. The force of it sent her stumbling backward, but something was different now. She could see patterns in the energy Diana wielded, could sense the connections between the mirrors and the wolves' world. The mirrors are conduits, Raven realized aloud, dodging another attack. They're not just portals. They're focusing points for power. Very good. Diana's voice held a hint of approval. You understand more than your mother did, at least. She never stopped to ask why the wolves were so desperate to cross over. Never questioned the stories she was taught. More wolves began emerging from the fractured mirrors, but Raven's focus remained on Diana. There was something familiar about the way the woman's power felt, something that resonated with her own pendant. What really happened? Raven demanded, maintaining a barrier of silver light around herself and her allies. What did the first sentinel do? Enough. Her grandmother's voice cracked like a whip. Diana, you know the price of breaking the barriers completely. Both worlds would collapse. Better that than maintaining this prison. Diana snarled, her form beginning to shift. wolf-like features becoming more pronounced. The girl deserves to know what power she's inherited, what blood stains her family's legacy. The chamber had become a chaos of shattering mirrors and clashing energies. Kai's defensive arrays were failing, and the wolves were pressing in from all sides. But Raven stood her ground, her mind racing. Everything she'd learned in the past few hours, every piece of this puzzle, seemed to be pointing toward a truth no one wanted to face. The first mirror, she said slowly, looking at her pendant. It wasn't created to protect our world from the wolves, was it? It was created to imprison them, to steal their power. The fighting stopped. Every eye in the chamber, human and wolf alike, turned to Raven. In that moment of revelation, she felt the full weight of her heritage and understood that the path before her would require more than just learning to fight. The silence that followed Raven's revelation was shattered by slow, deliberate applause. Diana's transformed features settled somewhere between human and wolf as she lowered her hands, a cold smile playing across her face. Finally, she said, someone asks the right question. Tell her, Evelyn. Tell your granddaughter what the Winter family's precious legacy really means. Raven turned to her grandmother, whose face had gone ashen. Kai stood perfectly still, his floating mirrors dimming as if responding to the weight of the moment. The wolves that had broken through remained at the chamber's edges, watching, waiting. The first sentinel, her grandmother began slowly, was indeed our ancestor, Elizabeth Winter. She lived in a time when the barriers between worlds were thin, when humans and wolves existed in an uneasy balance. The wolves possessed incredible power, the ability to shape reality itself through what they called the moonweave. The wolves were not meant to be guardians or enemies, Kai added quietly. They were architects of reality, maintaining the delicate balance between all worlds, until Elizabeth changed everything. Diana's voice turned bitter. She saw our power as a threat, or perhaps just as something to be possessed. The details are lost to time, but the outcome is carved into every mirror, every portal, every barrier she created. She trapped them, Raven whispered, looking down at her pendant with new understanding. She used the first mirror to steal their connection to the moonweave. Her grandmother nodded grimly. Elizabeth believed she was protecting humanity. She created the first mirror as a prison, yes, but also as a conduit. It allowed humans, specifically her bloodline, to harness the wolves' power, to become sentinels. The pendant felt heavier now, tainted by this new knowledge. Raven thought of all the wolves she'd fought, their desperate attempts to break through. What she'd seen as invasion had been something else entirely, an attempt to reclaim what was stolen. But you said both worlds would collapse if the barriers fall, Raven said, turning to Diana. Is that true? After centuries of separation, yes. Diana's features shifted fully human again as she spoke. Elizabeth's actions created a terrible dependency. The wolves need the moonweave to exist. Humans need the barriers to maintain reality as they know it. We're all trapped in her legacy. Kai stepped forward, his dark eyes intense. This is why we've maintained the deception, Raven. Why each generation of sentinels carried on the fight. The truth offers no easy solutions. But there must be a way, Raven insisted, her mind racing. She looked at the shattered mirrors surrounding them, each fragment reflecting a different aspect of reality. If the first mirror could separate the worlds, couldn't it be used to reconnect them? Gradually, safely. Diana went very still. The wolves at the edges of the chamber let out low growls, but not of aggression, of interest. Even her grandmother and Kai exchanged thoughtful glances. The thought has occurred to others, Diana said carefully. But the first mirror was lost centuries ago. Elizabeth hid it away before her death, leaving only fragments of her power in artifacts like your pendant. Not lost, her grandmother's voice was barely a whisper. Protected, hidden where no one, human or wolf, could abuse its power again. All eyes turned to her. The implications hung heavy in the air. Raven's grandmother, the keeper of so many secrets, knew where to find the one artifact that could either heal or destroy both worlds. The shop, Raven realized suddenly. All those mirrors appearing overnight. The alpha wolf choosing this moment to return. It wasn't random at all, was it? Her grandmother straightened, looking older and wearier than Raven had ever seen her. Elizabeth Winter's final act was to scatter pieces of the first mirror across the world, disguised as ordinary reflective surfaces. Over centuries, they'd been drawn back together, responding to the growing instability between worlds. When the last piece arrived at our shop, it awakened Shadowfang, Diana finished. The alpha wolf was Elizabeth's contemporary. He remembers what was stolen. He must have sensed the mirror reforming. The chamber's atmosphere shifted as this truth settled. Enemies and allies alike stood in contemplation of what this meant. The first mirror was rebuilding itself, responding to some ancient mechanism or prophecy none of them fully understood. "So we have a choice," Raven said, looking at each face in turn. "We can keep fighting this endless war, maintaining barriers that are slowly poisoning both worlds, or we can try to fix what Elizabeth broke." "It's not that simple," Kai warned. "Attempting to restore the connection could tear reality apart if done wrongly. And there are those who benefit from the current separation, on both sides." Diana's expression hardened. The Sentinel Council would never allow it. They've built their power on maintaining Elizabeth's system. "Then we don't give them a choice," Raven declared, her pendant glowing with renewed purpose. "We find the reformed first mirror, and we make this right. Together." The wolves around the chamber moved closer, no longer threatening but attentive. Diana's runic tattoos pulsed with a softer light. Even Kay's mirrors seemed to shine more brightly, reflecting the possibility of a new path forward. But it was her grandmother's expression that told Raven everything she needed to know. Pride mixed with fear, hope with resignation. The time for secrets was ending. The real question was whether their worlds could survive the truth. The gathering storm. The underground chamber beneath Raven's grandmother's shop hummed with ancient power. Mirrors of all sizes lined the circular walls, each one showing different reflections of reality. At the center stood what remained of the first mirror, nearly complete except for one missing piece. Over the past week, an unlikely alliance had formed. Diana's knowledge of wolf lore combined with Kai's expertise in mirror magic had revealed the true complexity of Elizabeth Winter's legacy. The first mirror wasn't just a prison. It was a key to rewriting the fundamental laws that governed both worlds. "The final piece will arrive tonight," Raven's grandmother announced, studying an ancient text. "Carried by someone who believes they're delivering an ordinary antique. The Council's agents are already moving to intercept it." Raven stood before the largest mirror, her pendant pulsing in rhythm with the artifacts around her. Since discovering the truth, her powers had evolved. She could now see the intricate web of energy that connected all mirrors, all realities. More importantly, she could sense the damage Elizabeth's actions had caused, spreading cracks in the fabric of both worlds. "Shadowfang's pack is in position," Diana reported, emerging from a mirror portal. Her runic tattoos glowed faintly in the dim light. "They'll create a diversion when the Council makes their move, but we'll only have moments to act." Kai manipulated his array of floating mirrors, creating a detailed map of the city. "The Council has deployed their elite sentinels. They suspect what we're planning, even if they don't know the details. Once we begin, there's no turning back." Raven traced the carved wolves on her pendant, thinking of everything they'd learned. The Council of Sentinels, supposedly the guardians of humanity, had perpetuated Elizabeth's deception for centuries. They'd turned what should have been a temporary solution into a permanent power structure, knowing the cost to both worlds. "The original separation took one person's will," Raven said thoughtfully. "But healing it, that will take all of us, human and wolf, working together." Her grandmother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, which is exactly what Elizabeth never considered possible. Her fear of the wolves' power led her to choose imprisonment over cooperation. "We have a chance to prove her wrong." As night fell, they'd made their final preparations. The shop above had been cleared of customers, its windows darkened. Every mirror was positioned precisely, ready to channel the energy they would need. The wolves took their positions throughout the city, led by Shadowfang himself. The calm before the storm broke with the sound of shattering glass. The final stand. The battle for the final piece of the first mirror erupted across the city. Council sentinels clashed with wolf packs in the streets while mirror portals flared to life in every reflection. But in the chamber below, Raven focused on a different kind of battle. The complete first mirror pulsed with power before her, every fragment finally reunited. Its surface showed not reflections but the truth of what lay between worlds, the damaged fabric of reality itself, torn by centuries of forced separation. Council forces have breached the outer defenses, Kai reported, his mirrors showing scenes of combat above. We don't have much time. Diana stood with a group of transformed wolves, their forms flickering between human and beast. The moonweave responds to your pendant, Raven, but reshaping it will take more power than any single sentinel has ever channeled. That's why we do it together, Raven declared, raising her pendant. Its light caught the first mirror's surface, creating a cascade of illumination through every reflecting surface in the chamber. Her grandmother began the ancient incantation, words that hadn't been spoken since Elizabeth's time. The wolves added their voices in haunting harmony, and the very air seemed to vibrate with building power. Kai's mirrors spun faster, focusing the energy, while Diana's runic tattoos blazed with blue fire. Above, the sounds of battle grew closer. The council would not surrender their power easily, but as Raven touched the first mirror's surface, she felt something else, a resonance with every wolf, every sentinel, every being caught in Elizabeth's ancient choice. The pendant's light grew blinding. The first mirror's surface rippled like quicksilver, and Raven saw both worlds as they truly were, not separate realms, but complementary aspects of a greater whole. She saw Elizabeth's fear, her desperate solution, and the path to healing what was broken. Now, she commanded, and every voice, every power, every intention in the chamber focused through her into the first mirror. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, beautifully, the barriers began to change. Not falling, not shattering, but transforming. Where Elizabeth had built walls, Raven and her allies wove bridges. Where separation had caused decay, connection brought renewal. The moonweave, no longer imprisoned, flowed between worlds like silver light. Wolves and humans alike felt their powers changing, evolving into something new. The council's authority, built on maintaining the separation, dissolved in the face of a greater truth. When the light faded, Raven stood in a changed world. Through every mirror, she could see the results of their work. Wolves and humans moving between worlds not as enemies, but as guardians of a restored balance. The pendant at her neck had transformed, its wolf design now showing both creatures intertwined, representing harmony instead of dominance. The barriers are gone, Diana said in wonder, her form settling into a perfect blend of human and wolf aspects. But the worlds remained stable. Because they were never meant to be separate, Raven's grandmother smiled, tears in her eyes, only in balance. Kai's mirrors reflected the dawn of a new era as the last echoes of battle faded above. Elizabeth's mistake is finally undone. But our work is just beginning. Raven looked at her allies, human, wolf, and those who now walked between, and felt not the weight of an ending, but the promise of a new beginning. The first mirror stood restored, no longer a prison but a gateway. And in its surface, she saw countless stories yet to unfold, as two worlds learned to grow together once more. Let them remember this, she said softly, touching the mirror's surface one last time. Not as the day the barriers fell, but as the day both worlds chose to rise together. The first mirror's surface rippled in agreement, reflecting not what was, but what could be. And in that reflection, wolves and humans alike saw the truth Elizabeth Winter had forgotten, that the greatest power lies not in dominance, but in the courage to trust, to change, and to heal. The story of the Arcane wolves didn't end that day. In many ways, it was just beginning. But as Raven looked at her grandmother, at Diana, at Kai, at the wolves who had become allies instead of enemies, she knew they had written a new chapter in both worlds' history, one that began not with fear, but with hope.